Greetings, Iain from RTO here. Welcome to another album ranking, and this one is a viewer's request. Can't remember who actually asked, but I'm sure the person will make themselves known when I post this up. And someone has asked for the Psychedelic Furs, a band that I quite like. I haven't got much by them. I've got Greatest Hits album, and I've got their first two albums. But it's a band that I quite like listening to. Never saw them, but my friend Lee, who runs the radio, the rock show with Johnny Walker Facebook page, I know a lot of you guys watch that. He's seen them, and when he went to see them, he went with some people I know. Yes, Lee knows who I'm on about. They went to see them in Birmingham. So they went up on the train, got out at New Street, got into a taxi and says, "Can you take us to the Birmingham Odeon?" The taxi driver said it was quicker to walk. So they got out the other side. He told them exactly where it is, and it was literally the Birmingham Odeon. Well, it's a cinema, it's not a concert. I've been there. It's literally around the corner from New Street. So there's a funny story about the Psychedelic Furs. Anyway, they were formed in 1977 by Richard Butler and his brother Tim. Richard Butler, of course, is the vocalist from the Psychedelic Furs, and his brother plays the bass. They've had a few different lineups. They've split up, and they come back together in 2020. And they've released 8 albums. I've really enjoyed listening to them and getting. It's one of them bands that you lose, down because you haven't listened to them for years. But listening to them again, it sort of recaptured what I liked about the Psychedelic Furs. And I don't think they've made a bad album. There's some albums I prefer to the others, and now I'm added them to my Spotify library, all of them. So yeah, I've really enjoyed this one. This was a great one to do and a bit of reminiscing. So they've released 8 albums, so we'll have a look at those 8 albums. So coming in at number 8 then, we have the 5th album, and this was released in 1987, and it's called Midnight to Midnight. So we've got Richard Butler on the vocals, John Ashton on the guitar, Tim Butler on the bass, Mars Williams on the horns and saxophones, Paul Garisto on drums. We've got some additional musicians. We've got Marty Williamson on second guitar. We've got extra keyboards from John Carr and Ed Butler, some percussion from Steve Scales, backing vocals Frank Sims and Peter Hewlett. First track on this album is called Heartbreak Beat. This is a sort of typical pop rock sound track from the late 80s. It's got some nice sax on it, horns. It's okay. It's not brilliant, but it's a listenable track and a track of the time. Then we get Shock. Now, I've always liked this song. It's got some great riffs on this. It's sort of that post-punky sort of sound, but a bit more 80s-fied. It's a great vocal from Richard Butler. My favourite track on the album. Shadow in My Heart. Some superb saxophone on this from Mars Williams. It's a solid track. Very, very good track. Angels Don't Cry. It does what it says on the tin. You hear it and you automatically say, that's the Furs. Really good track. Then we get Midnight to Midnight, a really good track, some great guitar work here from John Ashton. He's a really good guitar player. One More Word, solid track again. Again, there's some nice guitar touches. Tim's bass comes through nicely, and another really strong vocal from Richard. After All of the Law. Some great riffs again in this one. Terrific stuff. Solid track. Torture. It's alright. It's a little bit too poppy for me. And then we get No Release. Probably the worst track on the album. It's a bit wishy-washy, weak. It sounds more like Spandau Ballet than Psychedelic Furs. And then they decided to do a 1986 version of Pretty in Pink. And all I'll say about this, why mend something that isn't broke? Yeah, it's not a bad album. Very an album for the time. I don't think this one's dated very well. Although the tracks are good, it hasn't dated very well. So I shall give this one an RTO ranking of 5 out of 10. Okay, then coming at number 7, we get a 1984 now, and for the 4th album, and it's called Mirror Moves. So once again, we've got the mainstay of the band, Richard Butler on lead and backing vocals, John Ashton on the guitars and Tim Butler on the bass. Miles Williams is back on the saxophone. We've got Tommy Price playing drums on tracks 2 and 3. Keith Forsley on the drum machine, which is always a bit thing in drums, and Ed Buller on keyboards, but he's uncredited on this album. The Ghost in You. Now, this is a song I've never been too keen on. I think it's just too commercial. They went a bit over the top, a bit overproduced. Here Come Cowboys. Love this song. The drums are pretty good on this. This is Tommy Price on the drums. Best thing about the track is that lovely drum beat on that. Heaven. It's going away from their sort of original sound, but it works. It's got some nice guitar work from John Ashton. Heartbeat. The sax on this is brilliant, but it doesn't sort of suit the the sort of Psychedelic Furs. I mean, it's a great sax solo, but it's a bit of a mixed track for me, that one. My Time, pretty good track. Great vocals from Richard Butler. This is more poppy than rocky, but sorry, it's the other way around. It's more rocky than poppy, and it's a really good track. Like a Stranger, great bass line here from Tim, but it's got that horrible 80s commercial keyboard on it, which I don't like. Alice's House, pretty good track. I like the keyboard in this, even though it is 80s. It really fits this track. It's got some good guitar working as ever. Only a Game, my favourite track on this. You can know it's the Psychedelic Furs. It's got some 8-inch production on it, but it's a solid track. High Wire Days, another great track. This is going back to the basics of Psychedelic Furs, and it's a really good track. It's a reasonably good album. It's quite commercial in places, but it's got some really strong vocals from Richard. John Aston's guitar works pretty good on it. So I'm going to give this an RTO ranking of 5.5. Okay, then coming in at number 6, we have the most current album, and it was released in 2020, and it's called Made of Rain. 8th album, and it's their first studio album in almost 30 years. That's something incredible. So on here we have got Richard Butler, Tim Butler, Paul Gustero on drums, Rich Good on guitar, Amanda Kramer keyboards and production, and Miles Williams is back on the saxophone. So it's near enough the original band. So the first track is called The Boy That Invented Rock and Roll. Really good track. Got some nice guitar work on this from Rich Good. Some great saxophone from Miles Williams. Solid track to open up the album. Don't believe they hadn't lost that sound. That guitarist is really good. They've gone through a full cycle. The verse, really good track. Then we got my favourite track on this one, You'll Be Mine. Really good track. The driving guitar work on this is absolutely fantastic. Great vocal from Richard Butler, whose voice is still there. Wrong Train, catchy as hell, this one. Richard's voice, I think it's still good, sounds good, but it's a little bit deeper as he's got older. Our voices do change as we get older, but it's just still a really good track. This'll Never Be Like Love, very pleasant track, nothing special, but it's still a very pleasant track. Ash Wednesday, it's a little bit too long, about 2 minutes too long, but it's still a reasonably good track. Come All Ye Faithful, nothing to do with the carol. It's a bit disjointed, this one. It doesn't run smooth. I think it might be a combination of two songs that they can finish as two songs. They put them together as one, and it just sort of, you can tell. Then we get No One. I really like this. The guitar work here from Rich is fantastic. Really capturing the early days of Psychedelic Furs. Tiny Hands, it's a little bit different, but it's really good. I like that track. Hide the Medicine, again, solid track. There's just nothing wrong with this track. Turn Your Back on Me, got some good guitar work here again, really good. Then we get Stars. I don't like this, not very memorable. Now, considering this is their first album in 30 years, it's not a bad effort actually. When you have bands that haven't played together, like in the original sort of get-up, the tensions there. No, they really put out a nice album. So I'm going to give it an RTO ranking of 6 out of 10. Okay then, coming at number 5, we've got the 7th album. That's the one before the current album, released in 1991. It's called The World Outside. And on here it's Richard Butler on the vocals, John Ashton guitars, Tim Butler on the bass. The additional personnel on this one is Don Yellock on drums, Knox Chalander on guitar, and Joe McGinty on the keyboards. First track on this one, Valentine. Great bass line here from Tim as ever. Drives the song along. Really good song. In My Head. Some great drumming on this from this Don Yellock. John Ashton's guitar work is good. It's proper sort of psychedelic first sound. Good track. Until She Comes. This is probably one of the weaker tracks on the album, but it's still good if you get my drift. It's just a little bit lacklustre in placing, but it has got a strong melody. I think it just needed a little bit more bass, a little bit more drum in it, and it might have been a little bit better. But it's not a bad track. It just lacks a little bit of oomph. Don't Be a Girl, not a particular favourite of mine. Then we get my favourite track on here, and it's called Sometimes. Solid track, but what really lifts this is John Ashton's guitar solo. Absolutely stunning stuff. Then we get Tearing Down. It's got that really distinctive Psychedelic Furs sound and a great vocal from Richard. Really strong track. There's a World. Got a lot of keyboards in this, and it really works. It gives it that extra depth and eeriness to Richard's vocal. Get a Room. Brilliant bass line from Tim. I do like the title Get a Room. Some really interesting guitar effects here from John. It really works. Better Days. This is what they were doing in the mid-80s without that production, that rather smooth production. It's just a little bit rawer. It's a really good track. Then we get About You. Nice song. A bit different. Great bass line. Good way to end the album. Really good album. I haven't heard this album in a little while, and I quite enjoy this. I've had it on quite a lot lately. It's one of them albums that I didn't pay too much attention to when it came out, but now I really do appreciate it more. So I'm going to give this an RTO ranking of 6.6. Okay, then coming in at number 4, we go to the 6th album now. This was released in 1989 and it's called A Book of Days. It's Richard Butler, Tim Butler, John Aston and Vince Ely on drums, so no keyboards. First track on here is called Shine. Great little rock track. Love the bass line from Tim. Got some great guitar work from John Ashton. Solid track as usual. Entertain Me. Some good drumming on this. The bass line again really dominates the track. Richard Butler on form, good track. Then we get the title track, Book of Days. This is a very, very atmospheric track. A great vocal from Richard. The drumming from Vince is really special on this. Solid track. Should God Forget. We've got a great bass line and a great guitar riffs. I like that track a lot. Torch. It's got a more acoustically sound to it and it's quite a gentle track. It's really good. Then we get my favourite track, one of my favourite tracks by Psychedelic Furs. It's called Parade. It's got a driving riff all the way through. It's old style Furs. The solo is just cool, really cool. Then we get Mother Son, a really good rocker from Psychedelic Furs. That's the bass line though that really drives the song. Then we get House, solid track, again, great bass line from Tim. Wedding, the riffs are really good in this and John's really thrown out the riffs on this album. It's a really good track. I Don't Mind, certainly goes back to the roots of Psychedelic Furs, that dirty guitar riff, a great bass line again from Tim. Always been prominent in the Furs as Tim. That's a really good track to end the album. I think this was the album that they went back to form. They'd gone away from the commercial 80s poppy sound and they've gone back to that proper alternative indie rock that they were known for. It's a great album, and I'll give this one an RTO ranking of 7 out of 10. Okay, coming in at number 3. This is the second album from 1981 called Talk, Talk, Talk. It's got Richard Butler on vocals, Roger Morris on lead guitar, John Ashton on the rhythm, Tim Butler as ever on the bass, Duncan Kilboard on saxophones, keyboards and Vince Ely on the drums. Dumb Waiters, this is a really interesting track. The saxophone is a little bit off kilter, but apart from that it's okay. And then we get the classic, Pretty in Pink. Yes, it is my favourite track by Psychedelic Furs, but I liked it from the moment I heard it. I'm not one of these that's tagged on 20 years later. I've always liked this from day one, and okay, it's the one that everyone plays, but there is a reason, because it's a damn good track. Then we get I Wanna Sleep With You. Love this track. Great sax on it. They actually got the sax right. Really strong track. Then we get No Tears. Classic sounding Psychedelic Furs here. The vocal from Richard is brilliant. Really good. Mr. Jones. Driving riffs here from both John and Roger. You really played well together. Really good track. Into You Like a Train, proper post-punk. Absolutely brilliant. But it was a post-punk with a little bit of class. Excellent track. It Goes On. Great guitar work from Roger. And Richard's vocal on this is amazing. Love him singing on this. So Run Down, second favourite track on here. It's Vince's drumming that's really good, and then you get that little bit of saxophone as well. Solid track. All This and Nothing. This is one of Tim's best bass lines on any track that he played on. Oh good, it's so alternative post-punk rock sound. Absolutely tremendous track. She Is Mine, probably one of the least favourites on here, but what is good about it is Tim's bass line. Pretty strong album. It's classic sounding. Psychedelic Furs, play this quite a lot, and I'll give this an RTO ranking of 7.4. Now, 1 and 2, up until I did this album went straight to the top of the list because I thought nothing could beat it. It's the debut album from 1980, just called the Psychedelic Furs. So it's got Richard Butler, John Aston, Tim Butler, Vince Ely, Roger Morris and Duncan Kilburn. First track on here, India. Great track. The guitar work from both John and Roger is fantastic. Really good. Then we get Sister Europe. God, this is so David Bowie. Ziggy Stardust. You know, I think these were very influenced by Mr. Bowie. And I really like that track. One of my favourite tracks on the album, and one of my favourite tracks by the Psychedelic Furs. Imitation of Christ. Gentle sort of start. I love the guitar in this. Got this sax on it that's really strong. Great track. Fall, the thumping bass line from Tim Butler really is good. And the sax on top of it really gives it an extra depth. Then we get Pulse. A really good track. It's another great bass line from Tim. It's that, you know, very raw Psychedelic Furs, really good track. We Love You, very post-punk, but it was at the time. Really good bass line, very eerie in places. Wedding Song, I've never been a fan of this. It just doesn't work for me. It's a bit... And then we get my favourite track on this album, and it's Black's Radio. Probably my favourite track behind Pretty in Pink. I just love the drums from Vince on this. The sax really works. The two twin guitar work is absolutely fantastic. Flowers, the last track on the album, so punk, it's brilliant. Short, sharp, 4 minutes 10 of really aggressive, proper punky rock, post-punk song. Now, I thought this was a brilliant album. It still is to me. I call this is intellectual punk. The saxophone. Classic album. I never thought anything would beat this. But I'm going to give this an RTO ranking of 7.5. Now, my number one, when this come out, I didn't like it. And I actually got rid of the album. And I haven't listened to it for years because I just didn't like it. Now when I started listening to it again, I sort of regret getting rid of this. So, what a fool I was. Never mind. What you do when you're foolish and young. So my number one is the third album from 1982, and it's Forever Now. Richard Butler on the vocals, John Aston on guitar, Tim Butler on bass, Vince Ely on drums. And this has got additional personnel, Todd Rundgren on keyboards and marimba, Gary Window on horns, Don Evans on horns, Ann Sheldon on the cello, and Flo and Eddie, which is Mark Volman and Howard Kalen on backing vocals. First track on here is called President Gas. Great track. Absolutely brilliant. I love the bass line from Tim. Then we get the big hit from the album, Love My Way. And this is at the time I thought, oh, this is brilliant. You know, heard this, got the album. Was so disappointed in the album, but that's all changed now. But I just love this. I do like the keyboard in it. I like the sort of plinky plunky sound on it. It's really, really good. Such a catchy tune. Then we get Run and Run. I love this now. I think it's got a catchy chant to it. Lots of piano, some great drumming. It's an absolutely terrific track. Merry Go Round, another track that's dominated by Tim's bass line, and on top of that, Richard's singing on this is terrific. Sleet Comes Down. This has got a great bass line. The keyboard sort of whirl it round it. The bass line, very, very different. Forever Now. I like the start of this. That bass line, that little bit of keyboard coming through. Good track. Danger. The drums are great in this. The riffs are good. Robert really giving it all on the singing. He's near enough talking, but it's still tuneful. Then we get my favourite track on this. I think it's always been one of my favourite tracks. And it's You and I. I love the start of this again. It's them drums again, that bass. Vince and Tim really working well on that. Excellent track. Goodbye. Another track that's dominated by bass and saxophone with a great vocal from Richard. No Easy Street. Now this features Todd on the piano. Very, very good. The bass line dominates it. The drumming's brilliant from Vince. The saxophone solo is amazing on this. And it's a good way to end the album. When I listened to this for the first time in a long, long time, I thought, why didn't I like it at the time? I think at the time I was all wanting that gritty, punky sound, and this was a little bit poppy for me at the time. But now, I think it's a brilliant album. I think it's got a good mixture of songs on it. It's got some post-punk songs on it. It's got sort of modern post-punk with that saxophone. A little bit poppy, but not too poppy. This is the start of their commercial, but I think this is a great album now, and I'll keep playing it. I just can't believe I took this to a charity shop. What an idiot. But hey ho, we do things when as I said, when we were young. So I'm going to give this one an RTO ranking of 8 out of 10. So there we go, a little bit of Psychedelic Furs, and thank you for whoever suggested this one. It really made me go back and listen to these and reconnect with this band. And as I said, I've now followed them in Spotify, so it's in my library, and I really enjoy listening to them now. And I should have liked them more than what I did. But hey ho. So that's all for this. I'll be back later with a retro ranking. It's a little bit different this week. I'm going to look at some Queen songs, but not their good songs. The ones that really irritate me. And shouldn't. I don't know why they recorded. But every band goes through this, don't they? Not every band has put out brilliant tracks. And I found 20 songs by Queen that really irritate me. This may be controversial, but I like a bit of controversial now and again. So join me for that later. Bye for now.